Creativity loves constraints. If everything is possible, which it is at the beginning of a novel, fair enough, but if everything is possible, it's actually harder to come up with ideas. The more you're constrained, the more you have like nothing to work with, because you have no resources, because you have this tiny space, you're forced to think more creatively. So this is about giving you some pillars and some goalposts to help you be creative. And then all right, welcome to part 2 of my brainstorming ideas series here. So you have your setup, you have your question, you have your problem, you might have your chart. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to part 1 and see how we set it up. So I'm going to talk about external sources of inspiration and ideas first, and then internal. So the external are ways to use things that exist to get ideas, and the internal is how to are a bunch of techniques, many of which are like researched. There's one at least that's like very well used in design thinking for coming up with creative ideas, and they're not really mutually exclusive, because for example you could take something from an external source and then use one of the techniques in the second half to make it your own. External source number 1 is obviously research. I am advocating for some massive internet rabbit holes here. Maybe time box them. You don't want to be doing this forever. You don't want to be stuck in the I am researching forever and not writing phase. No, you want to write. But give yourself time to go down those internet rabbit holes. Even if you aren't writing something that generally needs research, like we know historical fiction needs a lot of research. Maybe you're writing about a place you've never been to. Obviously there's research, but research anyway. So for example, I am writing a heist book. And so I did a lot of research around like robberies. I watched a lot of YouTube videos with like former jewel thieves and former mobsters and former gang members and people, just to get a sense of like what that world was like, what kind of rules there were. Read some news articles about different heists that have happened in history. If you haven't heard about the Great Canadian Maple Syrup heist, this is your moment to pause the video and go Google. I don't mind. Go read that because it's incredible. Even if you don't use it, it's a good way to get ideas. All right, the next external one is using other books and or stories as your source of inspiration. So I am a bit of a nerd. I really like, and I've benefited a lot from like in detail analyzing certain books that are kind of similar to mine. But if you are, say, trying to work on a scene, and if you analyzed or if you remember off the top of your head a scene in a book or a movie that is similar to yours or accomplishes the same beat as yours, you can use this as a baseline. You can use that scene as a baseline. You can analyze the scene in terms of like inciting incident, turning point, crisis, climax, resolution. You could just look at the beats, like they did this, then they did this. You could look at the intention, what does the character want in the scene, and then all of the obstacles that come up. You just want to understand some of the bones of that scene. And then there are a couple of things that you could do here that might help you give ideas. Number 1, put your characters in that exact scene with those exact beats, but in their own voices. Number 2, brainstorm ways the scene could fit into your novel. How would it have to be tweaked? Where would it be taking place? And number 3 is take a specific beat, like an action-reaction beat, or a specific obstacle that the character encounters. And there's usually multiple obstacles within a scene, right? So just try to like narrow it down and write down 10 to 15 scenarios where the sort of same general shift happens, that same basic thing is accomplished, but there's different emotions, different characters, different settings, different scenarios, and just sort of twist it, see how you can change it. Another example of this, you can do it on a more macro level. For example, you could look at a big story and try to break down the plot archetypes in it and see how they interconnect. My example here is The Diplomat, which I freaking love right now. It just came out on Netflix. I may have watched it twice already. But in The Diplomat, there are 3 main plot archetypes. 1 is an information plot. Who blew up the ship? 2 is a performance plot. Will Kate be a good ambassador, thereby allowing herself to become the vice president? And 3, there's a marriage plot. you have the relationship between Kate and between Cal. So, interesting things happening here. I'd say that the performance plot is the main one. However, the relationship creates obstacles in the performance plot. The performance plot creates obstacles in the marriage plot. The information plot, as things are revealed, it changes how Kate is performing. It changes her actions. It creates more conflict, and you see how they go together. You could do that in a similar way for one of your favorite stories, and then use it as a foundation or a baseline for your own. The next one is use a conflict or a trope thesaurus. Just kind of paw through it. And when something resonates, write it down. And then the next one is use genre. Look for descriptions, analyses, breakdowns of your genre. I recommend StoryGrid and Save the Cat websites for that. Or better yet, do your own analysis of your favorite book in your genre and write down the conventions, the obligatory scenes, the things that are always in that genre, and use these as goalposts about which you brainstorm. So here it is. Here is the meat. Here are the techniques. Technique number 1 is the twist. And you will see why we came up with all of those external pillars earlier. Because here's where you are looking at that trope, that genre convention, those 3 plot archetypes that go together, whatever it is, and saying, how can I turn this on its head in my own story? For example, when I was writing my historical fiction story, I originally had the mom be very overbearing. She wanted her daughters to marry. She wanted her daughters to marry well. And it wasn't working for me. I was like, this isn't very interesting. I'm bored. It was very like Downton Abbey, Pride and Prejudice. And then I thought, what if she didn't care at all, or even became an obstacle to the marriage? That's a twist. Another brainstorming technique. Ask yourself, what do I not want to be in this story? This goes back to creating constraints. Creativity loves constraints. Maybe you don't want the main character to fall in love in your story. Maybe you don't want there to be just ex machina. That's a fine thing. Just write down everything you don't want. Number 3, ask what if. This is very broad. I know, it's a little bit cheap, but like, what if these characters fell in love? What if X had a secret? Number 4, what are my worst ideas? What is the worst possible way to solve this story problem? Why are you asking yourself this? You're not going to go with the ideas. You are just trying to free your brain from judgment and letting things come. Number 5, free association. Use a random word generator or image generator. In the days of AI, this is really easy to find. And see something come up and then try to relate it back to your story idea through a free write. For example, say I have a story idea about a diplomat. We're just gonna go with that example. And I get a random image generator, and it gives me a picture of a rose. I say, okay, interesting. How could I relate this to my idea? And I write it down. I'm like, okay, maybe there's a character named Rose. Maybe there's a rose garden at the embassy. Maybe there's something hidden in a rose, like a hidden message. Maybe the rose signifies something. Oh my God, the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games used roses. You see. Whatever number we're on, 6, is don't brainstorm. By which I mean, get yourself set up. So do what was in the first video, then get like a notepad or a voice recorder app on your phone, put it in your pockets, and go for a long walk. Let your mind wander. Just wander. Don't put pressure on yourself. Don't make yourself think. Just observe, just wander. And then you will get ideas. And when you get them, write them down. And then the big one, and this is what I'm taking from design thinking, is called SCAMPER, which stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, and rearrange. Substitute is all about replacement. What elements of my story could be replaced with another? Some examples. Substitute one character or storyline idea for another without changing the overall story. Can you replace the midpoint? What part of the book could be replaced with a better alternative? Could you swap your setting for another, or an element of your world building, or the setting of a particular sense? Can I change the rules? Can I change my characters or the audience's feeling or attitude towards X? Combine. How can I combine 2 or more parts of my story to make it stronger and solve a different problem? Things like, Can I combine these two characters? Can I make can I squish these two scenes together and make them do one scene, do two things at the same time? Can I condense two subplots into one? Adapt. What can I adapt? Which ideas could I adapt, copy, or borrow from other stories? What historical event or person could I tweak? One of my favorite things, I was at the Fringe in Edinburgh last year, and I was having a really difficult time with my antagonist. I'm like, she's boring, I hate her. I don't know very much about her. And then I saw this show called Bloody Mary Live, and I will like link the channel below because it was so funny, it was so good. And in the end I was like, I'm giving my antagonist Bloody Mary's backstory. That is, Bloody Mary is in Mary the First of England. It was great. And now I love her. She sucks, but I love her so much. Adapt. Can I adapt my target audience? Maybe it's an adult story, but it's not working. Or maybe it's middle grade and it is actually more YA. What would I need to change in order to ... So what would I need to change in order to reveal the premise earlier, make the twist more surprising, create more empathy? Fill in the blanks. Modify, which could also be magnify or minify. Minimize? I wrote minify, I think it's minimize. What plots or characters could I put less emphasis on? What, like, side character could really become like a walk-on? What elements could I bring out more and highlight? Again, talking about characters, maybe I have a side character, maybe they become important. Could I add another romantic relationship or another character? What if the story was half or double its current length? And that one I really like because it forces you to think how you would make that happen. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but I like the thought exercise around it. Put to another use. How can I put my story elements to other uses? Could I change a part of my writing process to make this smoother? Could I use a different resource? For example, if you've been working with Save the Cat, go look at Story Genius or Anatomy of Story and substitute, just use a different structure. How could I take a character and give them a different role or archetype in my story? For example, the ally is a hidden opponent, or the mentor becomes a subplot character as well. Eliminate, which speaks for itself. What can I give the boot? Do I really need this character? What if I eliminated X plot, element, subplot, secret, scene altogether? Can I eliminate some of the rules of my world? Or can I reduce the time over which the story takes place? For example, instead of a week, make it 48 hours. And then you have finally rearrange. How can I change, reorder, or reverse my story elements? Could I swap where events in the story occur? i.e., change the alles lost moment to midpoint. Could I rearrange my reveals sequence so the secrets and things come out differently? How could I reorder my plot or structure so that X happens? And can I change the pace? So these were a lot of questions. As I mentioned earlier, I have like links and freebies and all that stuff on my website for you to access these because there's a lot to remember. So take the sheet, it's a little PDF, download it, use it. We're amazing. So at this point, you have so many ideas. They're all over the place. Make sure you're writing them down and move on to part 3 where I am going to discuss how to actually take those ideas and make those creative choices. I will see you there. I'm Nicole Wilbur, and thank you so much.